Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about animated textures. Now if you have no idea what an animated texture is, this is basically what an animated texture is, what you're looking at now. It's a texture that has animation applied to it. Basically simple as that. It can be useful for a lot of things. You can use it for what I'm using now, as in smoke. You can use it for fire, you can use it for sparks, basically anything that is repeating over and over again. And I'd like to thank one person in particular, the Timster. I asked him, he has a tutorial about animated textures, and I think the versions of Blender have allowed it to be a little bit outdated, so this is sort of an update and sort of some way you can get smoke in your game, because I've had some issues with that. So if you're wondering how to do it in Blender Game Engine, we're going to do that now. So what you're going to need is Blender. You're going to need a video editing software. You could use iMovie. I'm going to use HitFilm 2 Express because I got that for free. And then you can use a photo editing software. I'm going to use Photoshop. You could use GIMP, but you'll see later. So first what we're going to do is we're going to make a smoke simulation in Blender. So we'll get right to that. Alright, and so we're going to start with a blank project here. We're going to be in Blender Render. You can also make a smoke simulation in Cycles now. I do not know how to do that as well, so just for the simplicity of this tutorial, we're going to be doing it in the Blender Render. I'm going to basically make a smoke, sort of just a pillar that's going to be going up in the air, and this is how I like to make smoke myself. So what I like to do is take a circle here, cut it in half, vertices. There you go. Pretty simple. The easiest way to make smoke, just do it very quickly, is just go to Object, go to Quick Effects, Quick Smoke, and there you go. Something pretty simple. Now we're going to clearly have to scale this down a little bit. Scale this up, and you'll see a simulation. We'll go ahead and make sure the center of this is right in the center, just to make it easier to scale up. Alright, we're going to scale it up pretty big. It doesn't really need to be this big. In fact, that's super huge. But alright, and then you can just see, if we click, I believe if we just go play, you'll see we have a very simple smoke simulation going on. This is clearly not what we want. If it's what you want, go right ahead. You're done. No, I'm kidding. But for a fact, I know that I want my simulation to be 96 frames long, but we won't worry about that right now because we sort of want the smoke to be going while our simulation is made. So we'll just leave it at about 200, or not 100, 200. There we go. So instead of just using the mesh, which you can, if you want your smoke to be just generated from the mesh, you can do that, but there's not a lot of stuff going on. It's sort of just a straight seam of smoke, as you can see. It's pretty bland, pretty boring. Nothing too interesting about this. So what we're going to use is a particle system. We're going to have to make one. So we're going to make particle simulation with about, let's say, okay, so to end it, frame 200. We'll start at frame 1. It's going to keep going over time. You can do, we'll say, about 1,500 particles. The lifetime does not need to be this long. We want the lifetime to be about 1, and just frame up random, or actually 2, we can do that. So you'll see now, if we just play, there's this little spurt of particles down there, and that is basically what we want. Alright, so you can make this, you can change this a little bit. We'll just give it a slight bit of random on the emitter velocity, just to give it a little bit of, you know, obviously randomness to it. Just to make it a little bit different, as if we were just to leave it the same way. So you eventually will have to change this to render to none. You won't be able to see it if you change it right now, so we'll just leave it halo so we can actually see the particles. And then we'll go in here and change the particle to particle system. Alright, now, so if we click Alt A, we'll get somewhat of a smoke simulation. We'll go back here, and there we go. Still doesn't look too interesting, and that's because of a couple factors that we'll change here in a second. Now, most smoke, you want to have wind. There's really no place on Earth that doesn't have wind, even the slightest bit. So we're just going to assume that you will have wind here. We'll use a little wind force here, so just pick it out. we'll scoot it over to the right. We're going to get ours to move left. So we can scoot this a bit over. And this whole thing about smoke, you can basically do this any way you want. This is just the way I'm setting it up. So if we click Alt-A now, we get a smoke that's moving to the side. It's a little bit too much, so we'll put this at 0.2. And we'll let it reset itself. Yeah, just barely moving to the side, maybe even 0.1. Alright, and that looks to be good. One thing we can do is we can check initial velocity. This can allow your smoke to go out a little bit faster. It's really up to you if you want to add that or not. I'll just leave it in just cause. But here's where we're going to get the smoke to look really good. I'm going to change the divisions about 96. The vorticity all the way up. Vorticity basically, you can change it to 4. It doesn't go any higher than 4. Basically what vorticity does is it makes it really wispy, and wispy makes it look really good. So yeah, check smoke high resolution. We're going to do 2 divisions of high resolution. You can do more, just depends on what you want. And we'll do smoke adaptive domain so that the domain itself will adapt to it and will only be there like that. Now, this might make your computer slow, so as you can see, I only have about 6 FPS, which is pretty bad. So we're not going to worry about this. One thing I can see about my smoke that I do not like is that it's very centered. It's not very straight up. So what I'm going to do is I can do a couple things. The density here, I would just check smoke high resolution off so you can just see what this looks like. Change this to 64 divisions. You can change this. So the higher number, the faster it's going to move up. Now, since this is a certain kind of smoke, I don't want it to move too fast, but we're going to move it to negative 0.2 to see what it looks like. Moves a little bit faster, a little bit nicer. But it sort of seems to flatten out, and we don't want that. So we're just going to go back to 0.001. See how that does. That looks pretty good. Not super fast, but just a good enough speed for me, I think. And then what we'll do now is you can have a time that it dissolves at. This, I really don't understand how it works. There's slow, and then there's, just normal. Slow seems to do it over time. 5 is not 5 frames, it just means 5 something. Who knows when it dissolves. But I'm just going to leave this at about 50. So it will dissolve eventually, getting up to a certain point, and slowly fade out. This is up to you, really. I mean, all of this stuff can be changed however you want. This is just how I'm doing my smoke simulation. So that looks good enough to me. And what we'll do now is we're going to actually change the particle simulation. I want the particles to move up a little bit more. So we'll just make on the z-axis about 1. That's the way they'll go. Whoa. So yeah, that's a little bit better. Maybe we'll change that to 0.5 so it's not as fast. Okay, and that looks pretty good. We can change the density down on the domain, excuse me. Change it to negative so it doesn't move as fast. So there we go. Changes back to 2.5, so it's not moving up a ton, and that's pretty good. Give this a little bit more of strength. Alright, cool. So it looks good for our smoke. Maybe we'll give it a little bit less. This is really, it takes some tweaking just to get your smoke looking how you want. And then what you do is you'll go in here, get your divisions. I like to use 96, high smoke resolution at 2. Now what you have to do is you have to save this project before you can bake it. So just go ahead and save it to where you want to. We'll call this smoke tutorial and save as a Blender file. Alright, now it's going to start at frame 1 and it's going to end at frame 200. So we'll do that. And then just do bake all dynamics. Alright, so once your smoke has baked, You'll see it here. This looks pretty good. Nothing too amazing, but it's good enough. So grab your camera here. If you click Shift S, you can move it around with the WASD keys. Cool little fun trick there. Just line it up. It's best to have the bottom of your smoke simulation at the bottom. Your animate texture, and I would change the resolution to 512, 512, and these are the images we're going to be making. So then we'll have this zoomed up. Make sure we're not in the cube. And if you are, let's see, this is a little bit big. Just position the camera where you can see it basically straight on, and we'll move the focal length up. Change this to about 80. There we go. Okay, and so with this smoke, since it's going to be seamless, we don't want it to see it starting, because if it keeps starting over and over again, it's not going to look good. So we're going to need a place where it starts in the middle. So I want to say about, let's say about 80 frames. Frame 80. We'll start there. And I already know I want my animation to be about 96 frames long. So 80 plus 96 is 176. So if we go to 176, we'll go here and just click end frame at 176. You can do whenever. This is just a good frame that I think to be the best. So you have it. You can go ahead and render it. Just see what it looks like. Now you notice something, all these things down here, this is because we have halos on our particle system. So we'll do none, and you could see the little cube in there, so we'll do none emitter, so it won't render the emitter. You won't see that at all. Now when we render, it looks good, but there's one more problem, and that is that we can see the background. So easy way to change that, go into shading, change the alpha to sky, and change it to transparent. So when we render it, you have alpha channels in here. And there we go. So here's your smoke. Now pick a place to render it out, and we'll do that. We'll be right back. Alright, now assuming that you have already exported your image sequence, I'm using my video editing software of choice, which is HitFilm 2 Express. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import an image sequence. I'm going to grab the one that we just made. Right here, so here's our sequence. It's 90 frames long, or 96 frames long. I've added in, if you look at it right here, this is what it looks like. Nothing too interesting, but just good enough. What we're going to do is I'm going to make a composite shot of this, and as you can see, it's 4 seconds and 1 frame long. 0, 1. Okay. Now here we go. Here it is. It's over black, as you can see. Nothing too interesting, but what we need to do is blend it together so that it makes it look like a seamless smoke going on and on forever. So the best way to do this is to go ahead and cut your video in half. See, this whole video is 4.1 seconds long. Let's make sure it's at 4 seconds just to make that easier. Change our composite shot to 4. Oops, sorry. So we'll just change our composite shot to 4 seconds long. And here we go. So we'll cut it right at 2 seconds. So we have one half right here, and we have the other half over here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start the video in the middle and end it in the middle. So what we have is here, and once we play the video again, it'll end. So technically, right through here, it's seamless, but we have this little middle part where there's just a change randomly. So the best way to do this is to blend these two together. And the easiest way to do that is make a full second of blending. That way it can flow a lot more smoothly as if you were to do it really fast or really quick. Sometimes even longer is better, but you are very limited to how many pictures you can have in an animated texture. So we're going to chop it to 3 seconds, and what we're going to do is you're going to change this back to 3 seconds long here. That you have that, what we're going to do is we're going to start this one with a 0 transparency beginning, so you can't see it. And once we get to the end of this one, it will be 100% transparency, so we can see it. It's basically going to fade in. And what we need to do with the other one is get the other one to fade out. So just simply do the opposite. Grab the opacity, have 100 here. Once we get to the last frame, which is actually this one, we'll click 0. So we get this blend. And so since you just made this, it is very visible, and it's clearly obvious that there's a switch. But if you don't really pay attention in the game, you can't tell it too much. And maybe the best way is to actually have this blend for a long amount of time, but just since this tutorial is this amount of time, this is what we're going to have here. Alright, so what we'll need to do now is render this out and export it as an image sequence. Now a couple very important things if you're using Blender or using HitFilm or whatever is you need to make sure it has transparency and it has to be with RGBA. So we'll just call this Smoke Tut Seamless for SL, and we'll export it. Okay, so now that you've exported your image sequence out in your video editing software, what we're going to do is we're going to load up Photoshop and or GIMP, whatever you have. And we're going to do some math basically. So we're going to create a new image. We're going to have to find out how many frames of animation we actually have in our image sequence. So if we look here, come back, we have 72, and it's, even though it starts on 0 here, that technically is frame 1, so that would make it 72 frames. So if each frame here is 512 pixels, we'll have to multiply it by making out. Now there are some rules when coming to make a sprite sheet like this. Blender doesn't like more than 16 by 16, I believe. So you don't want to have 16 going one way, and you don't want to have 16 going some other way. So since we have 72, we're going to make a grid basically. And so this is the math I'm using. I'm going to have 6 up. I'm going to have 12 width, like a width of 12 and a height of 6 pictures. So to do that, you're going to have to estimate how many pixels that actually is going up. So if we multiply 6 times 512, which is the height here, it comes out to be 372. And if we multiply 12 by 512, we'll get 6,144. That'll be different depending on how you make it, how many frames you actually have. So we'll look at here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And you'll notice here we have a grid. Now this can be set up pretty easily. If you go into Photoshop, go into Preferences, Units, Grids, and Slices, you're going to have a grid. I set it to every 512 pixels because that's how big one of our images is. So every 512 pixels, you'll have one grid. Now I'm sure you can set that up in GIMP. You just have to look and figure that out. So the old way to do animated textures or make a sprite sheet was to use a GIMP plugin that would basically fill it out for you. It would start up here and would go across this way until it gets to the last frame down here. So you have the start and finish here. This is actually not right. Blender reads it now, and I don't know if it's changed this way, but Blender will read it down here, going right, start on the next one, going right, the next one going right, and then it will end up here. So we're gonna have to do it manually, and yes, that's basically it. So what you'll do, if you're using Photoshop, the easiest way to drag all of them in, just grab all your frames here, just drag them in, and you're gonna have to place the first frame of animation. It's better to zoom in and place it. So our second frame comes in, place it on the grid. Next frame comes in, place it on the grid. And you'll do this basically till you have all of the squares filled up. So you're going from bottom to top, left to right. So once I finish this, I'll be right back and show you how to use it. Alright, so once you're done, you should have something that looks like this, and your first frame will be here. Your very last frame of animation should be here. Alright, and what you'll do is if you're in Photoshop, make sure you take away the background so your background is all transparent like it should be. Go ahead and save this out, and then we'll go back in Blender. Alright, so we're back in Blender. go ahead and change it to Blender Game. A couple important things just to make sure your game will actually work. Change this to GSLSL. Animation frame rate 60. Doesn't really matter actually, but we just put it that anyway. Okay, what we'll do is just delete it, and I find the best way to import our image is to go Mesh, Images as Planes. This is an add-on. You can add it by going to File, User Preferences, and you can search it and just check it. Actually, the best way to import an Images as Planes is just use Blender Render again. Images Planes. Find your picture, Smoke Seamless. That's what I saved it out to. Our sprite sheet. Just add Z transparency. Shadeless, use alpha. This is just easier. Click import images as planes. You have this little thing. You can't see it because you've changed to material. There we go. We'll just scale it up by 4. And we'll rotate it this way. 7, rotate it this way. So we just have it facing towards the camera. There we go. We have this. Doesn't look too good because it's just our whole animations going on here. And then what you'll do is to actually make this animated. We're going to go in here. I'm going to go to UV image editor. We'll take this image out. This one. Here we go. Make sure your image is applied correctly. We have smoke seamless.png. Everything looks fine here. So we're going to plug in what we had earlier. We use tiles and animated. We'll start at 0. This was technically going to end at frame 71. Just pull it all the way. Actually, excuse me, we'll have to start with tiles. So we have x-axis. You might have to play around with this a little bit. So I believe x-axis is width. So we have 12 frames going one way. And y would be height. So we have 6 frames going that way. So that way we have like this. This is what it should look like. And then just click end. We'll end at 71. You see it can't go past that because that's how many frames we have. Speed, go at 20. 20 is always a good speed. Just depends on how fast you want it. If we click play, it's all messed up. And the reason that is because we haven't saved it yet. So what we'll do is we'll just click save. You have to save this as something. So smoke tutorial. I didn't spell that right. Smoke tutorial AT for animated texture. Save Blender file. And you can just open recent if it doesn't work the first time. Scale Y. Here we go. Click play. And there we go. We have our smoke that is seamless. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial. I hope to see a lot of you use this because it is very useful and it will make your games look a lot better. So if you do end up making something, please send it to me, either by commenting or finding me at Orozco3 on blenderartist.com. And thank you for watching. Please leave a like and a comment if you have any troubles. Thanks. Bye.